discussion team went through, was it 2 or 3 script editors? Do you think it was a bit unevenly written in places?
I actually think on the whole it was really well written, but it is true that Andrew Smith has said this, that he thinks sometimes different writers have different views of him. So, for instance, Terence Dicks wrote very much the Artful Dodger from Oliver Twist, whereas Andrew wrote a scientific boy. There was even some debate over the degree of his genius. Andrew thought he was a boy who was good at maths in a kind of, I live in Hoylake and I'm quite good at maths. And the genius idea actually developed a bit later. So there are those contradictions, yes. And I think probably having so many script editors doesn't help with that kind of thing. But the interesting thing is that people are made of many facets. And many people wake up in the morning feeling like a completely different person. It actually happens. I think people do have lots of shades, and I quite like the elements that seem contradictory, that actually seem to me to be not contradictory but believable. I think it's quite reasonable that people, just as they have different moods, people wake up feeling in a different mood. I think it's quite reasonable that people contradict themselves temperamentally, if you like, all the time. I think people do. So it's not something that really worries me. But I take the point, and I think there's something. Of course, Big Finish has done a lot of work of pulling out ideas that are just suggested in the television episodes and running with them. So that that's actually what I think about much more now, because that's what I do. The television programs are very, very old, whereas the Big Finish stuff's quite new and ongoing. So when I think about Adric, I'm much more thinking about Big Finish than I am BBC television in 1981. But I think what's great actually is that there's so much there. Because one of the things I said when I started doing Big Finish was I don't want him to discover some completely unexpected talent. I don't want him to suddenly, it turns out he's absolutely fascinated by ballet. I want the character that's in Big Finish, or everything in him, to come from the programme, so you can believe that it's the same person. But there's so much there, there's so much suggestion in him, that there's a lot to bring out. And they've done a fantastic job with them. I think the Big Finish scripts have been absolutely wonderful in developing all of the facets that are just hinted at in the original 40-odd, 42-odd episodes.
And there's a difference, isn't there, between being a genius and being a savant. Adric isn't a calculating machine. He's a very intelligent boy with moods and...
Yes, he's an immensely intelligent boy. He's also very young and inexperienced, and he is 15 years old. And I've met, I met a couple of very intelligent kids in my life, when I was at school and that. And I think he's quite well written. I think in the sense, I think he represents the way gifted children actually often are. I think there's something I think it's quite well done and quite thoughtfully done. I do think that there's quite a lot going on there.
Yeah,
I mean, we're not really silly about it. It's not Hamlet, it's a Doctor Who companion, so let's not be silly. But I think there is an awful lot there. And the stuff that rings true that I think is really interesting. I think he's often the most interesting character in, not the most interesting character, but I think he's often the most interesting companion in the stories he's in, on account of the writing. And I think that's very true at Big Finish. I think I've just done one just a few days ago, and I was just reading it thinking, this boy is the most interesting thing in this. I really do. And I say, I'm not talking about myself because I didn't write them. But I think he is often really the most interesting of the ongoing characters. He's the most elusive and difficult to define. And I like all that kind of stuff. I'm a big fan of the unsaid. I think nowadays in television too much is said and explained. But drama is often about things that are not said. It's not just what's... It's always good when audiences can pick up things that are there but are not articulated, because that's where real character is, and that's where real drama is. And again, we don't want to be silly about it, about what is a Doctor Who character, but nonetheless there is quite a lot there, I think. And so I always think he's very often really interesting. He's really interesting in The Keeper of Traken. I love that relationship, and between Tom and Adric is just stunningly good and sweet and beautiful and new. Nobody had ever done anything quite like it. But I love the way his relationship with the Fourth Doctor and relationship with the Fifth Doctor are palpably different things. And that seems real to me. I often think, what happens sometimes is Doctor Who collapses on the floor and his face changes, and everyone says, oh, that's really weird, Doctor, your face has changed. And then everybody just trots on as though nothing happened. Whereas Adric, I think the death of the Fourth Doctor is kind of a crisis. It actually has an actual psychological effect on him. And as far as I can think, that may be the first time that happened in Doctor Who, even though it's only in a muted kind of way. And again, I emphasise, I'm not being silly. I know I'm not being silly about it. But yeah, no, I think he does. But his relationship with Romana is different from his relationship with Tegan. His relationship with K9 even is, which I really like. His relationship with Nyssa. They are all distinctive relationships, and his relationship with the Fourth and Fifth Doctor are slightly different relationships. And I find that really interesting. And because people do have, you know, everybody's relationship with everybody they know is different. And I really like that. I think it's interesting. And a sign of an interesting character.
I was always very impressed by his, it was often unspoken, but his frustration at being so intelligent, knowing so clearly what he thought was the right thing to do, and having absolutely no authority to get his way.
Yes.
Are there any other questions from the audience, please? Mr. Collins, the taxi driver, if you please.
Hi, Matthew.
Hello.
I've never seen Dark Shadows. I know it's really popular with Big Finish, and Robert Dick keeps going on about it. But it is. Tell us something about it. Why is it so good? Allegedly.
Oh, it's funny. Dark Shadow. That's a funny old thing. Dark Shadow. It was a daytime soap for 5 years in the 1960s on American television. 5 episodes a week. So even though it only ran for about 5 years, that's 1,225 episodes, I believe. You can buy the entire set in a coffin. And it's real old 60 daytime TV. The sets wobble. You know, all the things that people say about Doctor Who that actually didn't happen. Like in Doctor Who, the sets didn't actually wobble. But in Dark Shadows, they wobble all the time. Actors don't bump into the furniture in Doctor Who. They do in Dark Shadows all the time. Because they're working, you know, they're literally turning up in the morning, running it a couple of times, and then recording it. And they were recorded in a studio which had a new studio upstairs, which needed the cameras at 4 o'clock. So whatever happened on a Dark Shadows day in the 60s, at 4 o'clock, those cameras were going up to the newsroom. So it was incredibly pressurized. But it's rather wonderful, rather magical and fascinating if you can enter it. You know, and everybody's chewing the scenery like crazy. But because they're, with all the struggle, I find struggle really interesting and quite exciting. This cast of actors were sometimes all over the place, but because they're really good actors, they can pull just wonderful things out of it. It's full of wonderful moments. But then you can have moments where it just plods along for episode after episode, it's really dull and that. But it's wonderful. The premise, though, as the series developed, was this vampire called Barnabas Collins does not like his condition. He is the first sympathetic vampire. And he is actually the first vampire since Dracula to change the idea of what a fictional vampire can be. Every single fictional vampire up till, you know, right up from Bela Lugosi, right up to Hammer Horror, even if they're not called Dracula, they're a version of Dracula. Barnabas is the very first vampire who is not a version of Dracula, because he feels guilt and he suffers. This happened quite accidentally. It's because the actor couldn't remember his lines. So all the people at home said, oh, it's quite sweet, really, isn't it? So they began to feel quite affectionate towards him. It wasn't planned at all, it just happened. But suddenly this sympathetic, rather baffled vampire, who's terribly unhappy at being a vampire, when he came on, the whole series took off like a rocket. It became this huge cult. If you were too young for the Beatles, you were probably really into Barnabas Collins. If you were like 8 years old, 9 years old. But I just think it's glorious. And once it really became gothic, every single monster you can think of appears in it. There's a werewolf in it. One of the characters, Quentin Collins, becomes a Dorian Gray character. There are monsters, a Frankenstein narrative. It's all wonderful. It's all nonsense, but it's absolutely wonderful. I love it. And the Big Finish version is really good. It's really well played, and of course nobody's struggling with their lines because everybody's sitting in the studio. And all of the actors, pretty much all of the actors from the original 1960 series who are still alive, are still doing it. You know, those actors that you hear at Big Finish are, for the most part, the original cast. So I've now met most of the original cast who survived and worked with them, and acted with them. And I love it.
Are they new scripts, or are they just been remade?
No, they're completely new scripts, but they are, as with the Doctor Who Big Finish stuff, they are within the continuity. So they take place. Sometimes they slot into a period during the run of the series, sometimes they take place after the series, but they all fit that continuity. And they are the biggest thing Big Finish has in America, actually. They do better in America than Doctor Who does. And I just love doing them. And also, I love Big Finish. Has been very nice to me. And I'm very fond of them, and I love what they've done for me with Doctor Who. But I love the fact they've used me in other ways. The characters I played in Big Finish bear no resemblance in Dark Shadow, bear no resemblance to Patrick at all. I played a villain, a sort of absolute horrible villainy person for 6 episodes. It was absolutely wonderful to play. So I absolutely love doing. I love the scripts are really good. I like the cast. The material's great fun, and I like the producers, and I just love everything about it. And I'm hoping they're still doing them, and I'm hoping they'll use me again. They've indicated they'd like to. But yeah, I love it. Oh, and another thing, if we're talking about Big Finish, is this thing, Shilling and Sixpence Investigate, by Nigel Fairs, which is one of these Big Finish originals. You know, Lou Jameson created one called Atta Girl about the ATA, which came out a couple of months ago. It's really, really good. But this one, Shilling and Sixpence Investigate, David Warner, Celia Imrie, Lou, and myself. And I'm playing a sort of silly-arse Bertie Wooster type in that. So again, a kind of character I've never, ever, ever come near to being asked to play before. So I just love the way that they use me, and they're quite, one or two people at Big Finish are quite adventurous with the way they use me, and I really appreciate it because it makes it all so interesting and enjoyable. So anyway, yes, so you've got to go out and buy some Dark Shadows now, and you've got to listen to Shilling and Sixpence Investigate, which I think comes out in, is it September? 8 episodes. It's great fun.
I've just discovered that the reason a female friend forced me to read through the Vampire Lestat at the age of 15 is because Barnabas Collins couldn't remember his lines.
Well, that is funny because Anne Rice does actually acknowledge that. But I have to say, Dark Shadows is a lot more fun than the Vampire Lestat.
Did you rate the film version when Johnny Depp did it?
No, all Dark Shadows fans got into a terrible stew about that. I quite enjoyed it. I mean, I thought it wasn't very good, but I quite enjoyed it. And I thought, and Johnny Depp had genuine affection for it. I think he did grow up watching it. You know, he said that Barnabas Collins was the reason he became an actor. But people got into a stew about the tone because he did it in this very comic way, and so all the big Dark Shadows fans were upset by taking the mickey, and it didn't find out much of an audience outside of Dark Shadows fans, so it didn't go down very well. I quite enjoyed it, but I wouldn't thrust it in somebody's hand and say you've got to watch this.
Is that sort of that classic mistake of taking something that was sort of accidentally camp and then camping it up? And
yes, which is entirely a different thing. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Dark Shadows was breathtakingly accidentally camp, but it's a very different thing from. Are you right, dear?
When you get one of these.
I barely started.
where does the time go? Where does the time go? Sadly, not all of us are immortal like Barnabas Collins, so I think we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for your questions. Will you please join me there? The Blue Box Boys get the order.